Hey, it's First Frontier Forward, Rob Z with you, and today I have Melony Lynch with me. Hey, Melanie, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Rob?
Awesome. So thank you for talking to us. I'm super excited to have you on. You're from Bedford, Pennsylvania, in Bedford County,
Yes.
and you were a fighter pilot for the Navy for a number of
Yes.
years.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Make sure I have this right. You were an aviator, an F-18 pilot, and you were a lieutenant commander from
Yes,
96 to 2007.
that's correct. That was my active duty time in the military.
Unbelievable. I love the fact that we got a chance to talk to you because, as we were talking before we started, there's not many people like you in the world. You were saying
Yeah,
like less than 1% of fighter pilots in the Navy are females, and you
or
were one
female.
of
That's
those.
correct. Yeah, yeah.
What does
When
that what does that mean for you? Like, how does that make you feel like that you stepped into something that most women never even think about getting into?
Well, as I look back, I'm certainly very proud of my time in the Navy and what I accomplished and the things that I've done. I loved it and had an amazing time. When I joined the Navy, I didn't really think about it as like that I was a small number going in. It didn't really occur to me. I wasn't trying to make a name for myself. I wasn't trying to get a spotlight on myself. It was just something I desired to do. And fortunately, there was a path to do that. But I didn't really see it so much as something I was trying to accomplish by being in a minority number. It just happened to be that that's the way it worked out.
What was your inspiration for doing what you did, for getting into the Navy, for becoming a fighter pilot? What your inspiration, or just like what brought you to those things in your life? Was it the way you were brought up, or just the
Yes,
fascination with flying?
a good bit was my upbringing. I had parents that were very supportive of everything that I did, encouraged me to be whatever I wanted to be. They really never put any limits on me, and I never heard things like, "Oh, you can't do that. Girls can't do that." I never heard anything like that. So it just wasn't even a factor for me to think that there was stuff out there in the world that I couldn't do. So I grew up doing that, and then late in high school, I just got this desire to be in the aviation field. Particularly, I wanted to be a commercial airline pilot. And even back then, there wasn't a lot of women in commercial airline positions. So I went to school for that. And even back then, I recognized, okay, this is not a traditional career path for women, but it was something that I was very interested in. I wanted to do it. I wanted something really exciting for my career. So that's what I pursued. But it's really, I would say a combination of my own personal drive, my upbringing, and just kind of a love for, I don't know, maybe the non-traditional type of things was really just kind of wrapped it all together and was my inspiration. I have no family members prior to me that were in aviation or flew. So a lot of people were like, well, that just kind of seemed like it was out of the blue. And I guess in some ways it was. But once I thought about it, it's what I knew I wanted to do. And it was my focus. Like there was just nothing else I was going to do. So I made it happen.
That's such a huge thing, and I think that we, especially today, with all of the perceivable opportunity that's out there, it seems like there's so much opportunity sometimes, but there's
Hmm.
really not that much opportunity because you got to pick something if you want to be really engaged and focused and satisfied with what you're doing. You got to find that one thing that
You do.
all encompasses your life. That's
Absolutely.
a very
And
important piece of the puzzle. Obviously, I don't know if you would call yourself lucky to have been able to find that, or like you just were naturally drawn to it. What would you say to somebody who's watching this, somebody younger who is trying to find out, like, what is my purpose? Make sure I get the right job. I just don't want to have a job to make money. I want to make sure I am satisfied and make an impact. What would you say to that?
well, there, I wouldn't say that there's a lot of luck. I really feel like you got to create the future that you want. Things
Mhm.
just don't fall in your lap. You do have to work hard for what you want. Figure out what your interests are and then research that and see what is available. Is it, how much education is it going to take? What kind of paths and options do I have? You got to look at things like, how much is the cost of that education also going to cost for you because you're going to be paying that back. But really, you want to find something that you definitely desire and love, because you're going to spend the rest of your life most likely working, so it might as well be in something that you have a passion or love for. That way you're constantly happy to get up every day to go do that. You need to have a purpose for it. But I would definitely say, like what I did a long time ago when I decided I wanted to be a pilot, I just started researching it. What kind of school was the best school for me? Where was I going to get the best education? What was going to provide the best opportunities for me to leave that school than to get out into the real world? So having a nice transition path is very helpful. And then thinking about your plans, there's lots of books and there's lots of advice out there. You can't make your future happen unless you have somewhat of a plan that you can keep following and checking into. It doesn't mean it has to stay that way, but it's a place that you deviate from or start from, and you get to that point and you continually reevaluate your plan. And that's what I did. I planned to go to college. I planned to go to a college for aviation. I was looking forward to going into commercial airline and going that path. But I did take a detour and go into the military. But from a young age, I had a plan and a path that I could focus and vision for where I wanted to be.
So obviously you didn't set out to be a fighter pilot from way back when you first started out.
No.
But you did stay the course of what you wanted to do. And I think that's a big thing. You get into college and you're not sure what you want to do with your life, or what, some people never figure out what they want to do with their life.
It's tough. Yes.
It is really tough. Luckily, you had supportive parents. I think if any parents are watching this, remember that.
Yeah.
Kids figure that out for themselves. You can't force them into something or they're not going to be happy.
They're not going to be happy, and they're going to choose a different way in the end anyway. So yeah, being supportive behind your children, pushing but not too much, and assisting with ways to find out more information, ways to transition into other things. That's where friends and families can be very supportive of a young person going off to school or a trade that they want to learn.
Did you have to overcome any of those hurdles? People saying you wouldn't be able to do this? Like when you go from saying I'm going to fly commercial airline, I'm sure that seems achievable. People see oh, okay, that makes sense. But now you're in the Navy. Now you're going to be a fighter pilot. Did you get some pushback?
I did. There was all along. I mean, there was probably never an opportunity where I didn't have some sort of struggle or some hurdle or some misconception that I had to overcome. And so when I started, there wasn't a lot of women really going into aviation, even as a commercial pilot, certainly not into military aviation. So I had people like, oh, you're not going to make it because they're not looking for women, or you're not strong enough. Those were common things I would hear. A lot of people were like, oh, women. I wouldn't say a lot, but there were certainly a generation of people that were like, that's just, you're not going to get in. Or if you get in, it's going to be because you're a girl. Drove me crazy. And that's not what you want to tell somebody. You don't want to ever tell somebody that they really can't do something, or those obstacles out there. You can inform them a little bit, but not say, it's not happening. Mm-hmm. So that was early on, having to deal with those type of hurdles. But even after I was in and accepted, whether it was in the aviation program at the college I went to, which was Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, there were some hurdles there, just getting over my own self-doubt, I would say. And then when I realized I really could do this and I had the aptitude for it, then when I joined the military, then I had to deal with attitudes from other people that didn't think I should be there or didn't want me to be there because I was infringing upon a traditional Navy environment. So I had to overcome those type of things. And military aviation is not easy. So I had to constantly overcome outside fears and internal struggles. But it's unrealistic to think that you're never going to have those in any career path that you go to. You just have to know that they're there, to acknowledge it and find ways to deal with it and overcome it, and not to let the outside forces and people project too much onto you and take that away from you from being able to do what you want to do.
Could you describe your mental thought process when you're going through? I mean, I don't know how much of it was just instinct on your part, like just who you were as a person, but to face the adversity that I'm sure you face, and also the fear that I'm sure you face of like flying a fighter, being a fighter pilot and flying an F-18. What was your mental? Did you have certain strategies or certain mantras or certain things
Well,
you would do every day to get yourself through that?
naturally, I am a competitive, ambitious person, so I already have it within me. I'm always looking for ways to better myself. So competitive nature. I always wanted to be, the best I could be at my own grades, be at the top of the class. I was always like proving to myself and to others, like, I've got what it takes. So I had that internal drive, which kept reinforcing constantly because fortunately I had that. So that's what propelled me to keep moving on. So I think somebody that wants to go into like a non-traditional path, women that want to be fighter pilots or anybody that wants to go in a path that maybe is more difficult, you do need to have your own motivation, because that's the only way you're probably going to be able to do it every day and get over some of the fears you have. You have to be internally motivated. So that's a strong characteristic. I think anybody that would be certainly a military fighter pilot would need to have the drive and motivation to excel. We're definitely known as type A type personalities, go-getters, usually very forward, direct. And I've been accused of that as well. But as far as the fear goes, having a respectable amount of fear for something that can be dangerous is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to manage that is the only way you're going to succeed. So you can't obviously have be an F-18 pilot and go into combat without knowing, that there's danger and there's a little bit of fear, but it can't be so overwhelming that it prevents you from doing your job successfully. So it's finding the good balance internally, emotionally, being strong, physically, mentally, those type of things that can get you over those fears. I never really had a mantra. I just knew I could do it. And it's like just an internal feeling like, yeah, I can do this. Yeah, it's tough sometimes, but I can do this. But I never had something that I just kind of always did. I guess in some ways I also, if I receive some negativity or some pushback from anybody, in some ways it almost propelled me to prove that I could do better than what they thought. Mm-hmm. And in some ways that's kind of good, to show people, you don't know what you're talking about. I got this.
Yeah, that's huge. That's so huge. It's so important to be able to maybe teach somebody else that, to be able to just to see like, wow, you not actually going in and physically teaching them, but like just hearing about your story, understanding that you accomplished what you wanted to accomplish, and you were in an elite group, and and a female at that, in a pretty much all male dominated world of fighter pilots.
Yeah,
it's amazing just to hear that story. I think that's really powerful. And I think of like, you hear about the biggest fear in the world is public speaking. Somebody's afraid to get up in front of a group of people and talk, and you're in a fighter jet saving the world or whatever it may be.
Yeah,
like I think that at least gives me some inspiration. Like my fears really aren't that big. Like I'm not at risk of death. I'm not battling other people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making things that are much smaller. I'm making things big that are actually pretty small, and I'm making them much bigger than they need to be whenever you're facing.
Everybody does that. Yeah. You internalize, you dwell on it, you can reinforce that in negative ways. There's just some things that you can teach yourself, just to know that you have innate abilities to be strong and be powerful. And if you know that you have fears, find ways to work on them. Like you brought up public speaking. Yeah, nobody really, grows up going, I love it, I want to do that all the time. But you just take small steps. You practice, whatever it is, from public speaking or sports or flying or golf, whatever. You have to practice each thing to get better at it and get your confidence up. Flying everything's based on it. The more you practice, the more you acknowledge it and work to get over that fear, the more success you're going to have in doing that.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. Is somebody tries something once, it feels uncomfortable, or they don't do well, and they stop, they give up, they
Yes.
quit. And that's how everybody starts. I mean, I'm sure you didn't jump in a plane and start flying right away. It didn't work that way. So it's like
right.
small baby steps, and then you
is.
pile those on top of each other, and eventually you have the library of work that you've done. But that was not
the foundation and the skills necessary to keep going on. In aviation, whether it was in college when I was going through aviation training at college, or when I went in the military, there was good days and bad days. There were days where I'm like, this is awesome. I'm the best pilot ever, or wow, that was really a tough day. And I don't know that, I'm going to be able to keep going with this. So I was successful in my aviation career, but it was not always easy. There were times where I did have self-doubt and wasn't sure what tomorrow was going to bring. But, I just knew that I could face that each day and get over it if I had bad days. And, the good days just kept me going more. So nothing is going to be easy that you want. You definitely have to just keep focusing on what your end goal is, where your vision is, and where you want to go. And if you keep looking at that, you'll get over each one of these hurdles every day. There were times I wanted to quit. It never lasted long, though, because I knew if I quit or I gave up, I would regret it. I had an opportunity. I had a vision and a plan, like we talked about a few minutes ago. And I knew if I quit, that was it. I wasn't ever going to get that back. So sometimes you have an opportunity that you may not be able to circle back to, and you got to just power through and just keep focusing on where you want to go. Everything that you do, whether it's college or a military career, there's going to be times where it's going to be tough. That's life, right? It's not always sunshine and rainbows out there. There are really dark and stormy days, and you just have to know that. And I think sometimes with the generation now that we're seeing, that things are easier and it's harder for people to accept maybe defeat or failure or negativity. But it's out there, and that's not going to go away. So recognizing it and having a plan and moving forward.
Yeah, and especially it's going to be not just from other people, but in your own head. There's going to be negativity.
Yes. That can be the biggest battle sometimes, is your own self-doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important what you said, because the whole vision part of it, when you don't have much of a purpose, or you don't have much of a vision for what you want to accomplish, then it's easy to give up. It becomes simple because you don't actually know what you're trying to do. But when you picture it and you're like, all right, and you set it in stone, like you said, you're a type A personality. So that means you've got the plan, and you're going to work the plan.
There's always a plan. There's a list. I'm always writing out things what I want to do.
But I think we can all adopt that. Even if you're not a type A personality, that it's a good thing to have in life, is to build that plan, to build that mindset of like, this is what I want. And then once you keep reinforcing it to yourself, then it starts to stick. So whenever something doesn't go right, there is no option B now. I'm not going to go just get a job at McDonald's or something. Like I'm not saying that's what you would end up doing, but it'd be like, now I can't become a fighter pilot. Forget it. I'm done. No, I'm like, I'm achieving this now. And every little setback stops becoming like somebody stepping on your foot or holding you down. Now it's like, wow, now I have more of a reason to do what I need to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Gives you more power to do that. So my thought is, if somebody wants to get into the Navy or wants to become a fighter pilot, do what you have done in some way, shape, or form. Are those numbers dropping, especially for women? Are there less in the Navy than there used to be? And what would you say to them if they want to get involved and they want to go through it?
So I don't believe the numbers have really changed, even from when I joined in 1996. So the last time I looked at numbers, it's still kind of really the same amount of women that go into the Navy or Air Force, and it's really the same amount that choose to go into the military aviation field or even get selected to be fighter pilots. So those numbers haven't changed, which to me is fairly unfortunate, because I'd like to see more people, particularly young women, that maybe want a very exciting career and maybe feel like there's, have some hesitation. I want them to know that there's certainly a path. It's certainly doable to go out and accomplish, whether you're a young woman or young man and you're just unsure. There's paths there to do that. And there's still those same amount of numbers. The military needs pilots. And the Air Force is very short pilots right now, from what I understand. So there's certainly a need for it. Never think that because of your gender, your race, or religious views, any of that are going to prevent you from going into a military aviation type of career. That's past. So you can definitely do whatever it is that you want to do. I think with anything, I would love to see the numbers increase, particularly for women, but for some reason it's just not there right now. But I'd be happy to talk to anybody that has aspiring goals, that aren't sure. I'm here to say you can do it. I've done it. I come from small town Bedford, PA. If I can do it, anybody can really set their mind to it and make it happen.
Definitely. And so you're still involved in the Navy, right? Now you're a defense contractor.
I am, yeah.
And
so I have a zigzaggy kind of path. I was a Navy fighter pilot for a good many years. Then I was in the Navy Reserves. Then I joined the Air National Guard and was with them until I retired. And while I was working as a Navy reservist and as the Air National Guard, I became a defense contractor for the Navy. So I still support the military. Now I assist with Navy acquisition programs and things that are going to be put on our naval aircraft. So future warfighters and pilots, or some of the work that I'm working on right now will benefit future pilots or pilots going out there today. So I'm still very involved, which I love. I love contributing to the military, to my country in that capacity. Not quite as exciting as being an aviator, but it's a good career path, and I'm enjoying what I do.
Do you have any stories from being up there in the skies, like scary moments, or any times that you thought, like, boy, what have I gotten myself into? I can't believe I'm doing this right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've got lots of stories. There were times, out at sea. I was in 2 campaigns. I was in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, and going in on combat missions. I was actually one of the first female fighter pilots going into Afghanistan right after September 11th. And I had a particularly scary evening one night going in country into Afghanistan. I was getting really low on fuel. It's actually quite a long flight to go from the carrier I was on, which was the USS Enterprise, flying into country into Afghanistan and coming back. It's a really long flight. And as an F-18 pilot, you have to refuel several times because there's just not enough gas in those little fighter planes to get you there and back. And so I'm in country, completed my mission, and needed to get home. But in order to get home back to the carrier, I needed gas. I needed to do some in-flight refueling. And there wasn't anybody around that could provide me fuel. And here it is late at night. I'm in what's considered bad guy country, and I don't have fuel to make it back to the carrier. And that was a very intense night, because I thought, okay, if I don't get gas, the only other option is to land somewhere where I would not be very welcome, and then, deal with the consequences that would come from that. So I came very close to having to land in Afghanistan, and fortunately, a big wing tanker from a couple hundred miles away was able to respond to my needs and came in, and I got some gas and was able to fly back to the ship with my wingman, and it was a great successful evening. But I remember that, the intensity level, and I've had problems flying where the F-18 has two engines. I've had engine problems where I've had to shut down an engine and I'm only flying on one engine and have to come back and land at the ship, and I've been shot at. And so there's some really great, exciting times that I've had.
I bet. So when you refuel, and this is just, I don't know anything about how this all works. When you have to refuel and there's a large plane that carries fuel and you can refuel in the sky.
Yes. Yeah.
How does that happen?
Without getting too technical, there are big wing tankers, and they have like in their refueling hoses with a basket. And the F-18's got an in-flight refueling probe, and you fly formation on this large aircraft and join up and connect in the air.
Wow.
To get your fuel. And you take on several thousand pounds of fuel to fill up your plane, and then you complete your mission.
That's amazing.
Yeah, flying formation with another airplane and refueling hose. Yeah, it's one of the harder things to initially learn when you're in flight training, but then once you get the hang of it, it's kind of like riding a bicycle. Then you just know what you got to do.
That's so fascinating. I never knew how that all worked. Did you also have to learn hand-to-hand combat? Is that a part? No. So if you if you had to, like you were saying, if you got stranded in Afghanistan, you'd have to fend for yourself.
Yes. We have certain amount of training. We get training, survival type training, and like survival evasion type of training. So there's aspects where we're trained on that, but and we carry protection with us when we fly in country. But I knew for sure, like if I landed somewhere, in a hostile area, it probably wouldn't go very well.
Right. Yeah, that's got to be nerve-wracking. Holy cow. I'm fascinated by the story. I could probably ask you 900 more questions just about how the whole structure works of flying. So you're on the aircraft carrier and you fly off the aircraft carrier into wherever you're going.
That's exciting stuff too. That's
boy. Yeah.
We call it cats and traps. Catapult, and then you come around when you land, it's called a trap. That's some of the most exciting aspects of naval aviation, and that's what sets naval aviators apart, is we're landing and taking off from a aircraft carrier, and that's pretty exciting stuff. I miss those days.
I bet. Do you still fly at all? Do you go out and do it?
I don't. I am still a civilian pilot, but I rarely do that anymore. It's something that now I have children that are 13 and 14, and I want to get them into general aviation. So that's part of my future plans here, is to get them interested in aviation.
Very cool. Well, Melony, I love your story. And by the way, I didn't call you Sable at all. So your call sign in the Navy was Sable.
Sable. Mm-hmm.
Which is that's an awesome name to have. Does anybody still call you that?
Yeah, there's a fair amount of people that do. So everybody that was in my squadron, we still always call each other by our call signs. And in the work that I do as a Navy contractor, there's a lot of fellow naval aviators, and we tend to like to call each other by our call signs. We're still clinging to our past, but there's a handful out there that still call me Sable.
Everybody loves having a cool nickname. Like, I want to have a cool nickname like that.
You got Rob Z.
Yeah, well, that's true, but it's my actual first name. Sable is like something totally different. That's really good. So, Melony, thank you so much. If people is there any other way to find out about your story, more about you? Have you written anything that's out there that people could check out?
No. Short answer is no. My husband would love to hear you ask me that. He has been pushing for me to write a book for a long time, and I haven't. So unfortunately, I don't have a book out there. I've been quoted in some books, but nothing out there. And no, I just have my personal Facebook. But I'm willing to, if anybody wants to reach out to you and get my contact information, I'd be happy to talk to any young aspiring aviators or anybody else that's looking for a non-traditional career path. I could offer some advice.
Cool. Excellent. And maybe this conversation will be piled on top of other ones that make you convinced that you have to create something to inspire people, because especially for women, I mean, wow, what an inspiring story. What an
Well,
empowering story. I think that it would really help. Not that you already haven't helped a lot of people, but that'd be very
yeah.
impactful for a lot of people, I'm sure.
If I knew for sure that I was reaching out and making an influence on people, I'd probably be very compelled to find ways to get a broader message out there. Yeah, knowing that if I spark some interest somewhere, that would be fantastic.
You should team up with the other 1% of female fighter pilots and put a team together or something like that.
You have great ideas. Maybe you could help out with that.
I would love to. Let's talk after we're done here.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. Well, Melony Lynch, fighter pilot for the U.S. Navy, and from '96 to 2007. Thank you for protecting our country. Thank
Hey,
you for
yeah,
all that you've done for the country. I mean,
loved it.
it's amazing that just to say, that you were able to keep us safe and to be out there on the front lines serving your country. A lot of us talk about something like that. A lot of us fantasize about something like that or pretend to do it in a video game, but you actually did it for real life in real life for
Yeah.
a long time. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I loved every bit of it. And I've enjoyed talking with you today. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.